The time has come to dial up the final home game for NC State football this season. Duke football, you are on the clock.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's Wednesday sponsor is Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms, as always, apply. Happy Wednesday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Today is Wednesday. We're going to start getting into the details of the Duke Blue Devils. It is the final home game of the season for NC State. Senior Day is loading up. It'll be a 3:30 kickoff on Saturday. NC State is looking to continue this newfound momentum after landing on Stanford. Duke is kind of in a space where they're looking to get right. Their schedule has gotten very real for them recently. They've started to struggle a bit, but they're 6-2. They've played some good football. They've played some questionable football. They're still trying to figure out what kind of season that they want to have. So today, Kenton, we're going to get into Duke. But before we do, what have been your initial impressions of Duke so far this year?
I think that Duke is a good team. I really do. I don't think that they're a terrible team or bad team by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that they're a team that objectively took advantage of a very soft non-conference schedule. And, you know, you can hide a lot with a soft out-of-conference schedule. But, I mean, it's a reason why that team is 6-3 while still being 2-3 in conference.
Talking about that relatively softer non-conference schedule, I'll get into what they've done so far this year. They are 6-3 overall, 2-3 in conference. They have a win over Elon, a win on the road over Northwestern. That was in double overtime, and in my opinion, they deserve to lose that one. They beat UConn at home in week 3. They beat Middle Tennessee State on the road. They won against the Dirty Foot Club in comeback fashion. They were actually down 20-0 before coming all the way back and winning 21-20. Then the schedule began to get real, like I mentioned. They went on the road to Georgia Tech, lost by 10, a score of 24-14. They beat Florida State without having to really use any offense at all because Florida State has zero offense. The score to that one was 23-16. Recently, they lost to SMU in Durham in overtime. That was the game where SMU turned the ball over 6 times, and Duke produced 0 points off of turnover. That came back to bite them. They ended up losing that one. And then just recently, as last weekend, they go on the road down to Miami, and they lose by a score of 53-31. So, getting into the details of the offense before we transition later into their defense, their quarterback is Malik Murphy, and he's had a little bit of an up and down year. I think there's things he does well, some things he doesn't do well, but all of which kind of factor into what I believe to be a relatively mediocre year. Duke is 12th in the ACC in passing yards per game at just 236. They're 15th in rushing in the ACC, just 107 yards per game. Now, I told you Malik Murphy has been up and down this year. He has over 2,000 passing yards and 20 passing touchdowns, but he also has 8 interceptions on just 58.9 completion percentage. He's weirdly good at throwing the deep ball, but he's weirdly mediocre at any other level of throw.
That's unfortunate. NC State has to take advantage of that, especially seeing as how this is not a team that runs the ball particularly well. That was another thing that was fool's gold in the beginning of the season. Everybody, oh my God, they're running the ball so well. They're so physical up front. And I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute. You lost one guy who was a top, I want to say what, 2 or 3 round draft pick in Barton, and you lose another all-ACC guy in the center Monk. And I believe they lost another guy on top of that was a starter in either borderline all-conference and all-conference last year on that offensive line. I said, hold on, player. Hold on, Trap. The math ain't math, and that you losing all of these studs up front. And you know, you've built up the longevity and depth at Duke to be good beyond that. And lo and behold, the season carried on, and we saw those numbers kind of decrease a little bit. So, you know, this is objectively a team. The offense is not the strength. The offense is not what carries the mail on this team, and that's just the reality.
100%, and I think we'll highlight that even more in just a little bit. Touching on their running game, which has been subpar recently, although they seem to be a lot better than they were earlier in the season. They are led by running back Star Thomas. He has the most rushing yards on the team by an extremely wide margin. He almost single-handedly won Duke that game against the Dirty Foot Club. He accounted for 166 rushing yards and 2 total TDs in a 21-point comeback. However, that was September 28th, and he's been held relatively in check since then. He's kind of struggled to be super consistent on the ground, and that's why Duke's rushing numbers have suffered so far. They've slipped, like I mentioned, all the way back to 15th in the ACC. NC State's offense, believe it or not, ranks ahead of Duke in both of those categories. If I would have told you that a couple weeks ago, you said I'd be smoking something. There's no way that could be true. You hope after last week's performance against Stanford, NC State's offense could, in fact, be turning a corner. However, what does concern me about Duke's offense is their wide receiving room. The tandem of Jordan Moore and Eli Pancall, they've accounted for over 1,000 yards combined receiving and 11 receiving touchdowns. That is nearly half of Murphy's pass yards and over half of the passing touchdowns. So for NC State, the recipe for me is beginning to become clear. You're going to need Murphy to beat you through the air, and your secondary is going to have to rise to the occasion.
Absolutely. This is a game that I think just have proper run fits and win at the moment of truth. That's it. Those are the two things I would say this team needs to do more than anything else, and you'll be fine. But if you cannot do those things, if you are getting out of position, if you are seeing situations where Duke's running backs are running wild because we're missing tackles, and the nastiest part about all this, we've seen a world where we fill a gap, but we don't feel the gap, right, and terrible things happen, right? Looking at you, first touchdown against Cal, where I have never seen a Mike linebacker go unblocked on a counter that came downhill straight at him and whiff like that in a college football game at the Power 4 level, but here we are. So this offense is not very good on its face. They are not so bad that you can, say, hey, this team's going to score 10 points against it. They're not that bad. They're not that bad at all. This game, like every other game, this matchup against this offense, like every other matchup against every other offense except one or two this year, is about NC State, period.
And your point about making the play once you're in position, that's been so crucial for NC State. I believe that's going to be one of the key stories in this one. If you can't get off the field in situations like 3rd and long or even 3rd and short, Duke is good enough on offense that they can make you pay for it. Again, they're not exactly going to blow your doors off, but it's not quite because they're devoid of talent. I think Malik Murphy can be a good quarterback, but I think there's just little things that he has to clean up the rest of this year and then further into his career. I've also had my eye on Duke's play calling on offense. I think that's been very suspect. In fact, I've seen a lot of Duke fans cry out on social media about how bad it truly has been. And I would tend to agree. In a game where you produce 6 turnovers against SMU and you cannot score off of any of those, that points to a very clear issue of play call and therefore execution. But all told here, NC State's defense, they have to rise to the occasion and complete the job. If you're in position, you have to complete the play. Something that NC State has struggled with is mobile quarterbacks. Malik Murphy is not that. In fact, he has negative 66 rushing yards on the year, probably because of sacks, but he only has 14 carries that he's been credited with. So he's not going to run on you. So that's why we said you're going to have to make Murphy beat you through the air. Challenge him with your secondary. Challenge him with your blitz packages. Challenge him with your ability to complete the play and get off of the field. This is the game where NC State cannot beat themselves, because if they don't, they give themselves a good shot to win. Coming up next, we're going to switch gears and get into the details of Duke's defense. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Our first Wednesday sponsor is Hims. We had a couple of y'all ask when this one would return. Today is your day. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have time to go to the doctor's office to get treated for ED. So through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside of your door. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments, all from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, Viagra, and Cialis for up to 95% cheaper. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS, hims.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON, for your personalized ED treatment options. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Our second Wednesday sponsor is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if that first $5 bet hits. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page you're placing all of your bets. Just head on over to FanDuel.com in order to join today. Again, you'll get that $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet hits. That's FanDuel.com in order to get started. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Middle portion of our Wednesday show, now flipping gears and getting into the details of Duke's defense. Duke's defense, conversely to the offense, is their strength. There's really no doubt about it. Their passing defense is actually first in the conference, first in the ACC. They only allow 192 passing yards per game. That's also good enough for 34th in the country, so a strong unit there. However, Kenton, I'll go ahead and tee you up for this one. Before we jumped on here, you believe that is fool's gold. Why is that?
Grayson, quick question. How many teams are there in FBS football?
133.
133. So we'll take the top, let's say 40-ish.
Okay.
Matter of fact, let's stretch it out to, if it's 143, let's stretch it out to 45. Okay. Let's stretch this out to 45. Now, we all know that Miami is the #1 passing team in the nation. Just out of curiosity, Grayson, have they played any other team that's in that top third or fourth quartile?
They have not.
So we are looking at a unit that is said to be the #1 passing defense in the ACC. However, fortunately for them, Kyle McCord and company didn't go see about them, have they?
They have not.
Tyler Shuck and company go see about them?
Surely haven't.
What about Kay Klubnik and company? You know, he's been up and down.
They have not run into the Tigers.
Well, it seems to me SMU probably throws around the yard a lot. Rhett Lashley, he's probably the guy who loves airing the ball. Wait, no, Rashard Smith is the guy there, and he's one of the best rushers in the nation. Where, just out of curiosity, I believe SMU is the highest team they played outside of Miami. Where do they rank in the country in terms of passing yards?
SMU's passing attack is 49th in the country.
So I say all this to say they have not played any offenses that are good at throwing the ball. Now, I know people are going to want to jump me for that one, but let me also say this. Manny Diaz and his defense do a fantastic job of disguising their coverages. They do a fantastic job of it. I am hard-pressed to find a head coach in recent history that is as good at, disguising coverages as Manny Diaz and company. The only problem is you can only disguise for so long. In the words of Johnny Cash, you can run on for a long time. Sooner or later, them players going to hunt you down. You have to make a play. Your guys have to make big plays. And don't get me wrong, this is a violent group. They do some thumping. They force a lot of fumbles. But in terms of who they are, when it comes to, hey, my guy's better than your guy, we're going to take this ball away from you. If you can read that coverage, you'll be all right.
To your point, Kenton, Duke has only faced one passing attack that ranked inside the top 50. That is Miami. So NC State, obviously, they're not in the top 50. And so that presents a pretty decent challenge for true freshman CJ Bailey and the rest of the offense. Now, you look good against Stanford. Duke is not Stanford. Stanford is not Duke. Duke does have the number one passing defense in the ACC. Have they been tested all that much? No, but that doesn't mean they're devoid of talent, much like their offense here. So Duke is very, very good, in fact, in turnover margin. They're plus 10 on the year so far. They forced 21 total turnovers. They've only turned the ball over 11 times. So they do a pretty good job of keeping control of the ball. They do an even better job of forcing turnovers on the other teams. A crazy stat that I actually found, they forced 15 fumbles by 13 different players. So it's not just one guy or two guys leading the charge. This defense is swarming. They fly to the ball, and they make you pay for it once they arrive. NC State, conversely, they've been near the bottom of turnover margin, but these last couple weeks have done a lot of good for them. They are now sitting at -2. It was far worse. They've come a long way. But make no mistake about it, Duke makes their hay on turning you over. So it's not really rocket science here. That's probably going to be what this game comes down to. If Duke's defense does fly around and they force a fumble or they force CJ Bailey into one or multiple bad decisions, I think it's going to be difficult for NC State to win this game. Duke's defense is good enough. When you look back there in the Duke secondary and you have guys like Jalen Stinson at safety or Chandler Rivers at corner, these are two guys that are probably going to receive some ACC honors at the end of this season. Rivers has 3 interceptions, out one of them. He's got 7 PBUs. He has a forced fumble. Stinson has 4 PBUs. He's forced a fumble. He's in the top 7 to 8 of tackling. Their leading tacklers are all 3 of their linebackers. In fact, Alex Howard leads them in sacks at 5. It's a good defense. And I think for NC State, it's going to be a very stark contrast from going up against Stanford and now having to face Duke. So it's imperative that CJ Bailey and NC State, maybe even more than any other week we have left on this schedule, you have got to take care of the football.
Yeah, and the good thing is CJ Bailey does not have a problem that lends itself extremely well to how Duke normally turns you over, in terms of he's not pulling it down and carrying it like a loaf of bread. Now, he does need to get rid of the ball quicker, but we saw over these past couple of weeks, his mind is processing the game faster.
It is.
It's processing it fast. Even when he's not, being great necessarily, his mind is processing the game faster for him to get rid of the ball and make good decisions, which is going to be necessary against this team, because you're going to see moments where, you think a guy's in the D3rd, LOL JK, I'm covering the flat, actually. There are going to be those moments against this Duke team. So, objectively speaking, CJ's going to have to be good again for this team to have success.
And if you're looking for a weak point in the Duke defense, believe it or not, it's their run defense. They actually rank 15th in the ACC in that category. They give up an average of 156 rushing yards per game. This poses an interesting question, I believe, for NC State, because we've talked ad nauseum about how we need to almost ditch the run in a sense to go pass heavy, because that's what we've excelled at the most this year. Last week, we run for over 280 yards on the ground. It seems like maybe Jordan Waters is back. Hollywood Smothers is continuing to steamroll here. Kenton, what do you think the balance should look like for NC State's play calling against Duke?
Damn, hell if I know, man. Normally I have really insightful things to say about this type of stuff, but it's all about which version of the offensive line comes out. Because if the more physical version of them that we saw against Stanford, that we've seen at times this year, comes out, run the ball. Run the damn ball. I'm excited about that. Hey, do your thing. Kind of create that situation where you're reestablishing the line of scrimmage. But it's hard for me to say I can count on that. And I can say, hey, that's definitely going to be a part of your game plan where you can get to. So, I want to see them try to run the ball. But if it isn't working, be okay with saying, you know what, we'll have to pass to set up the run.
I actually feel you in not having a great answer for that, because I'm kind of struggling to get a read on this myself. I think there needs to be a lot more of a balance that we've seen in weeks past, but how much of that balance do we need? Because I'm not exactly convinced that CJ can completely take this game over through the air and win it in that way, but I don't know how much you can rely on the run because of what you just said. What version of the offensive line are we going to get? If we're getting the first half of the season, Duke's going to eat us alive, point blank period. That will then in turn put a lot more pressure on CJ Bailey. I think that would present an opportunity for this year's game to look kind of similar to last year's game. Last year's game with MJ Morris at quarterback, you couldn't establish anything on the ground. You're having to solely rely on him to beat them through the air. Couldn't get it done. I hope and pray that that's not what we get on Saturday. So an overall theme of balance should be evident for NC State here, but it's going to be imperative that the O-line rises to the occasion, and the running backs for that matter. Jordan Waters, although he has been here and there at times, he needs to be here for this one. And what better fuel than having to go against Duke of all teams here? So if there's ever a game for Jordan Waters to be the physical lead back, I would love for it to be this one, because I think that creates such a change of pace dynamic with Hollywood Smothers. Thunder and lightning in this one. We're going to round out our Wednesday episode talking about NC State being favored and how much of a surprise that actually takes us by. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Our third Wednesday sponsor is ZBiotics. ZBiotics Pre Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct that's in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your very rough next morning. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. And just remember to take that ZBiotic before the first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and then, of course, you'll feel your best tomorrow. So, as mentioned before, step one is to drink the pre-alcohol before your night out. For the best results, make it your first drink. Step two is to drink responsibly once you are out. Pace yourself, hydrate, and then, of course, get that very crucial good night's sleep. Step three, enjoy the next day. You won't have to feel like a big bag of garbage the next day. You can wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on anything life throws at you. Head on over to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off of your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money with no questions asked. Just remember to head on over to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout for 15% off. And our fourth Wednesday sponsor, count them up, is Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, and that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events easier than ever before. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, and you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The curation of Game Time Picks makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it, they got it. Toggling the all-in pricing feature on the app will show your total upfront so you receive zero surprises at checkout. And as always, you get that panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect upon arrival. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, and again, create an account and use redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? You already know. It's game time. Last couple minutes here on Wednesday, just final thoughts of our pre-Duke analysis. We're actually going to have a crossover with JJ Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils for you on Thursday. So before we get into all that, Kenton, we are actually favored at home against Duke on Saturday by 3.5. Now, we all know in the betting world, teams will typically get 3 points for being the home team. So what that tells me, this is essentially a pick'em. Vegas is seeing this as a pick'em game, a 50-50 coin flip. How does that make you feel going into this game?
I mean, listen, you're looking at two teams heading in the opposite direction. One team is 1-3 in their last four, with some pretty bad losses in there. The other team is 2-2 with their last two games being the wins, and one of them being one of their most impressive wins in program history. Let's just be honest about that. And I know everybody's going to say beating Stanford is a big win in program history. Yes, it is. Scoring the most points you've ever scored in an ACC game is a big deal. Now, with that in mind, I am not surprised by this, because normally that 3 points, that whole 3 points for being at home thing accounts for everybody, right? But that includes situations where people are going across the country. And this one, come on now. From Wallace Way to Carter-Finley is what, 30 minutes?
Yeah, about 30.
And that's if you're following the speed limit, which me and Grayson, of course, do. We're law-abiding citizens. So, I mean, in all seriousness, this is a game that I'm not surprised is viewed as a bit of a pick 'em by Vegas, because, again, even though you've got two teams going in opposite directions, NC State has looked completely lost and out of sorts at times, and so is Duke. So I'm not too upset about this.
When we talked a couple weeks ago about how NC State may or may not finish the rest of the season, I gave you my hot take. I said I think they're going to go 4-0. This game, I think, had me more perplexed than any of the other three. And I know the last two are on the road, but even still, I think Duke's defense presents possibly the biggest challenge of anything else the other three teams could throw at you. This game is at home for the Wolfpack, and I think that can be a very crucial detail. I saw Dave Dorn mention again the fans, but in a very positive way, perhaps the way he should have attacked the whole year so far, basically saying this is the type of the game where fans need to show up, be loud, and maybe, too, you can make a difference in this game. The crowd atmosphere in this game, I'm expecting it to be very heightened. This is the last home game of the year. Like I told you, it's senior day. NC State fans are going to empty the tank, so to speak, both tailgating in the lot and in the stands once they walk in. Not to mention, it's a crosstown rival. Duke, we owe Duke some payback for last year. They completely embarrassed us, and that changed the trajectory of our season. 1 year later now, we have a chance to make that as an opposite effect. We can beat Duke this time and then positively change the trajectory of this season. It being 3.5 for the home team, essentially at a neutral site, it would be a pick'em. So it's a difficult game to read. And I also see the over-under set at 52.5. I do think this is going to be a low scoring, and it's going to be every bit of a dogfight. I think both teams are going to be scratching for points. It's going to be who makes the least mistakes. I think that will be the ultimate story of the game. So has NC State learned their lessons from the early parts of the year? We are bound to find out because Duke is the team that will force them if you're not careful with the ball. That being said, we're looking forward to a very highly competitive game on Saturday afternoon. That'll do it for us here on Wednesday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button, drop your comments in the comment box, mash that subscribe button if you have not already. Give us your early impressions on Duke's offense, Duke's defense, and Duke as a whole. Your early gut reaction to seeing NC State favored, perhaps how you see this thing going down on Saturday afternoon. Until tomorrow, we'll see you then. Go Pack.
Go Pack.